Mungu akubariki. I still stumble at it, but I'm working at it. That's God bless you in Swahili. And I'm going to learn it because I really love these people. I love this orphanage. I love Father Methodius and Papatia Evelyn. I love their children very much. So I'm going to learn Swahili, even though I'm terrible at languages. So I'm sitting on the bed that they provided for us. We have 2 beds in this beautiful room that is adjacent to their house, basically a room added to their house for guests. And it's very comfortable, very nice, has its bathroom in it and everything. And I'm sitting because, to be honest with you, I'm a little whooped. I'm a little whooped because being at altitude is interesting. I'm very physically fit. I'm not sick at all. But after several days at altitude, I feel fatigued sometimes. Of course, I had a cold when I came here. And I'm still getting over that cold. So my breathing passages are not 100% open. But sometimes I'm tired. I want to go run with the boys, but I don't dare do that yet until my oxygenation is higher. We have an oxygenation sensor that Marina happens to have because she's a nurse. And it's reading numbers that when I took care of people in the hospital, when I had those numbers, I gave them oxygen. But they were sick people. We're not sick people, we're just people that are acclimating to the lower oxygen pressure when you're 1.5 miles up. So our oxygenation is sometimes in the 80s, never in the 90s, in the 80s, low 80s. I feel okay, except you feel a little bit fatigued. You don't feel completely 100%. Despite that though, Father Methodius does not give me a break. He's a man who's full of surprises. So we were going to concelebrate the liturgy today, and I was quite comfortable with the idea of being the concelebrant with him being the celebrant. He had other ideas. So I was the celebrant. But it was sort of an interesting kind of combination, because the liturgy in Africa, in this mission, is the same and it's different. It has a lot of differences. One difference is that he reads the prayers, the silent prayers, aloud so that they can hear them, and he reads them in Swahili. So I would do litanies, and then he would read the prayer, and then I would do the exclamation. And, I don't really care if people are offended by that. I know we have certain practices and rules, but different cultures do different things, and I was quite edified by it. So I served as the celebrant. I even gave communion to everyone. Of course, I had to ask most people's names, although I know quite a few now. And it's funny, when you ask their name, they say it very softly. When they sing really loudly. It's kind of an interesting difference. So I'd sometimes ask for their name twice when I gave them communion. And I also consumed the chalice, so I did everything. And we basically, tag teamed it. I also did the sermon. I found something very interesting about the sermon. I was asked to give the sermon after the baptisms yesterday. We had 13 baptisms. When you're giving a sermon and it has to be bilingual, it was translated as I spoke. You have to speak slowly and simply. I'm not sure if I do either one that well in America, but I had to speak slowly and simply and kind of distill the parable of the talents down to simple things. Really, all of us need to know simple things. We don't need to know complicated things. We're not smart enough for complicated things, just simple things. So it was kind of revelatory for me. And I was speaking to all these faces, and the faces in a liturgy in Africa, at least the ones I've experienced, they're different. They are shining. There's a brightness in their eyes. And Africans smile more readily than Americans. And they're more attentive. Now, the English is not the first language of anybody, but everybody speaks English. The younger ones, not as well. The older ones, quite well. One of the young men, I think he's 18, is Moses. He was baptized yesterday, and he was my translator both times. And he translates excellently. And so I would speak in small sentences, trying to put things in small thoughts, and he would translate that into Swahili. And I really love the Swahili language. I'm trying to learn it because it's not that complicated, I don't think. I think it's going to be easier than learning a language like Russian or something like that. And plus, I have a reason to speak it because I have people that I love here, and I want to come back on a regular basis, and I want to communicate by email and such. And I could communicate with English, but wouldn't it be better to communicate in Swahili as best I could? And maybe the next time I come, if I give a sermon, it won't be in English and Swahili, but just in Swahili. Who knows? I'm not very smart with languages. We'll see how that goes. What else can I tell you about the liturgy? They have a practice of doing some singing extemporaneously in the liturgy at various points. That's not at all custom in America or Russia or Greece or anything like that. And they clap and they sing at various points in the liturgy. And I really liked it. Sometimes it was a little loud. You know how I don't like loud things sometimes, but it was very beautiful. And I've always, from all my life, I've always loved the sound of the African voice. I think African women have angelic voices, and African men have this beautiful timbre to their voice. I really like that singing. And there's a certain rhythm involved in it. Even if they're not clapping, there's a rhythm involved in how they are singing, almost like sort of a chant, well, to be honest with you, like the old slave chants when they were working in the fields, that sort of thing. Probably that's where those chants came from, is those Africans who had become slaves preserved their musical traditions when they were working in such onerous situations. So it was very rhythmic and very melodic, very loud. Sometimes they clapped. They were sometimes singing more Protestant hymns, I think. But I liked them. I would hope that sometime maybe I can introduce them to something like To Thee the Champion Leader, or Let God Arise and Let His Enemies Be Scattered, and they could probably do it a little bit differently. Maybe they could clap. Maybe they could do it like, they did a lot of antiphonal singing and a lot of singing, I can't remember what that's called, when someone, the canonist calls out and then they repeat, things like that. They have a young man who acts as basically the reader and canonist, and he was on the streets of, I think in this area, for 3 years. And he at one point came to Father Methodius and asked him for 100 bob for food. That's just 100 shillings, which is $1. And he hadn't eaten for a while. And Father Methodius said, well, there's a place where you can get food every day, and you can go to school. Would you like that? And he said, yes. And so from those beginnings, he went to school, and he was catechized and baptized, and now he's a reader in the church. His name is Paul. Very edifying to hear him sing and see how he conducts himself. And that's one of the edifying things, is seeing the care in which many of the young Christians are showing. Now, of course, there's boys that play and altar boys that mess around just like anywhere else, but the older altar boys did not. What else can I tell you about the liturgy? The liturgy was sung, I said, of course, everything in English, so the petitions were in English. The responses were in not Kikuyu. Most people speak Kikuyu here, but they were in Swahili. There was some Kikuyu also in the service, evidently, but Father, I think, said all of the prayers, all of the private prayers, in Swahili. Now, I serve prison liturgies, in which I literally serve liturgy with people within a couple feet of me, and to be honest with you, they can't sing very well. So I say the private prayers aloud in those situations, and I'll be honest with you, I really like that very much. I suppose maybe the private prayers became what they are now because in cathedrals and in big churches, and even in a moderate-sized room, doing the private prayers aloud is untenable because not everybody can hear them. But in a small, intimate environment, everybody can hear them, and they're very beautiful. I intend to eventually catechize using the private prayers, especially the ones from the Liturgy of St. Basil, which of course are more involved. What else can I tell you about the Divine Liturgy? I felt great life during the liturgy. I think there's a roughness here that Americans and people in the West are not accustomed to. I mean, they're on rough benches, and this is a room that's used as a library, and the Holy Table is just a table that they repurpose on Sunday morning. But there's such life, and there's such enthusiasm. The liturgy was shorter than usual. He skipped some parts because, I guess that's more the Greek custom that I don't like at all in America. But in America, we're spoiled brats who, do whatever. And I don't think it's appropriate in America. These are kids, many of whom have come off the street, that are learning about Orthodox piety. So he's trying to, as he says, I can't tell you the number of times he's told me this, slow, we're going to do things slow, and everything eventually gets to where we want it to be. So that's what he's doing. He celebrates Matins, a shortened Matins, and then it's in the Greek style, the Byzantine style, where they have the great doxology, and then we go ahead with the liturgy. And the liturgy had those parts that were removed that I guess is very typical in liturgies in America. I think it's disgusting in America. There's no reason for it whatsoever. But in this situation, it's a mission situation. But eventually this will not be a mission, because Father Methodius has great plans. He's a dreamer, but he's not just a dreamer, he's a doer. And he thinks big. So eventually, God willing, there's already land that they've purchased. They're on rented land now, in very rough circumstances. But they've purchased land, and they're going to build a dormitory, God willing. This dormitory will be for 180 children. Right now he only boards boys, because it's just too hard for security, it's just impossible. But when they have the dormitory, they'll be able to have boys and girls. I mean, there are girl orphans too, and their situation in life is much worse than boys, or can be. So there'll be boys and girls, and there'll be obviously adult supervision, and he'll probably build a temporary chapel in the dormitory, and then commence to teaching the school. There are buildings there that already can be used for classes, and then, God willing, to build a chapel. And that will be wonderful. And hopefully that'll happen before the end of the year. And he told me, I've been quizzing him about the costs. The average African in, for instance, Nairobi, who's poor, and most of them are poor. There's basically the poor and the rich in Africa, not too much in between. They live on $1 a day, 100 bob a day, 100 shillings a day. $1 a day is what they live on for everything. And one of the young men, who is a relative of Father, came from Nairobi, and he said that the nearest Orthodox church, with the bus fare and everything, would cost 300 bob a day. 300 bob to get there and back. Now what normal person can afford literally 3 days living to take a bus? So the circumstances here are often quite difficult, but I see more smiles here than I've ever seen in America, and I see enthusiasm. I think, to be perfectly frank, there's a lot of learning that needs to be done about the Orthodox faith, but I think the heart is there. I know the heart is there. And I've experienced that in the liturgy. To mention one more thing, Marina has been blogging, and part of the reason I'm doing this video is so that she sees a few things about the liturgy that happened and adds them to her blog. And the reason why is because she wasn't able to come today because of the altitude and adjustment to it. She has not been sleeping well. She didn't sleep well at all last night and was just absolutely exhausted, and thought that the better approach, and I thought so too, would be to get some sleep. So she got another 3 hours sleep, I don't know, something like that, and came to liturgy. The liturgy was over when she walked and got to the compound. It's unfortunate, but next Sunday there will be liturgy again, and God willing, she will be well enough to be able to go to it. I'm also looking forward very much to the funeral for His Grace Bishop Athanasios. We've gotten official word that his remains will arrive first in Nairobi and then later another airport in Kenya, I believe on Tuesday or Monday, and then on Wednesday will be the funeral. So Father Methodius and I, and probably Marina, will go. It's a 600-kilometer drive, so it's a long drive. If I might mispronounce this, but it's called the Kisumu Diocese. I'm looking very forward to it because I think it's going to be a completely different experience. Not a completely different experience, a partially different experience. I'm sure there will be the funeral service, there will be the bishop residing, but I have a feeling there will be other things that happen too. Because from what I can see, Africans love to sing. And they brought their singing to the liturgy. So I'm looking forward to that very much. I think in many ways it'll be almost like Pascha, and I'll of course meet many other people that I've corresponded with a little bit on Facebook and Facebook Messenger and things like that. I'll see them because all of Orthodox Africa is going to gather for this, or at least Orthodox Kenya for sure is going to gather for this funeral because Bishop Athanasius was very much beloved. So I'm looking forward to that very much, kind of hoping Kisumu may be a little lower, maybe in a valley if I'm lucky, and I'll be able to recover a little bit, and hopefully next week I'll have enough hemoglobin in my blood, extra hemoglobin, and I can go running with these boys. They run every day, and they would leave me behind right now because I'm just not acclimated yet, but I'm getting there. May God bless you, and may God help you in all things. I encourage you, if you watch this video all the way through, to contribute to this mission. It's St. Barnabas, and you can look it up, St. Barnabas. I think it's Orthodox School and Orphanage, I think it is, or it might be Orphanage and School. You can contact me if you want. We want to raise the $45,000, and we're hoping to do it in a kind of clever way, instead of doing it like with PayPal or something like that, and PayPal gets their 8%, their piece of flesh. Instead of that, I'm hoping that people will send money to our church earmarked for dormitory, and I give you my solemn word that we will earmark those funds, all of them, and next time I come to Africa, or Father Silouan or someone else is coming to Africa, we will bring them the cash. As far as I know, you can bring up to just under $10,000 in cash without declaring it, so that's what we're going to do. We would be able to bring Maureen and I almost $10,000 each if we do that next year, and that way we can bring them the funds they need and they can begin construction as soon as possible. This is a worthy thing to do. It's one of the most worthy things I've ever experienced. If you came here and saw these kids, you would find that you suddenly have much more room in your heart and many children in it. Mungu akubariki. See, I still can't do it straight. I'm still struggling. They laugh at me a little bit, but I'll get it right. Mungu akubariki. That's God bless you, but since I'm talking to multiple people, I actually should say it a different way. I don't remember. There's the plural way to say it. It's written in my notebook, and I don't want to grab my notebook and take the time. God bless you and help you in all things. Amen.